Let's get some travel updates now, because as no doubt you will be aware, there has been a massive fire at an electrical substation, including the backup generators which care for the power at Heathrow Airport, causing the entire airport to be closed today. Significant disruption emanating from that. Let's speak first to travel guru at The Independent, Simon Calder. Simon, what is the latest? I mean, this must be having huge sort of reverberative impacts on the entire travel network.
Oh, it's just absolutely awful. I'm speaking to you, Alex, from Glasgow, and of course every single flight out of Glasgow, Edinburgh, Aberdeen and Inverness was cancelled today, along with another 1,300 or so other flights. It's difficult to overstate how bad this is. We've got Europe's busiest airport completely closed, over 1,300 flights, nearly 250,000 passengers due to fly in or out. And some of the passengers who were aboard flights that were actually in the air at 3 a.m. when the order came out, right, we're closing Heathrow, are now finding themselves strewn across Europe, from Reykjavik in Iceland and Shannon in the Irish Republic, right across to places like Lyon in France and Munich in Germany. So an absolute mess, and no sign yet about when things might improve.
What would your advice be to somebody who is now finding their flights cancelled or severely delayed? Is there any form of compensation they can get? Because speaking earlier to a travel correspondent, she was saying that actually, because this isn't the fault of the airlines, yes, they have to try and provide you with an alternative way of getting back home. Yes, they might have to give you food, water and even a hotel, but they don't have to pay you back.
That's exactly right, yeah. Look, I'm in the position of being like thousands of people. I'm at Glasgow. I've got a booking for a flight this afternoon. It's not going. So British Airways has to, in theory, find me a hotel for a night until it can get me where I need to be, or find me another way back, although I'll probably just hop on a train. And that is the strict duty of care is very separate from the compensation. Compensation only applies when the airline messes up and you're over 3 hours late or your flight's cancelled, and that runs into hundreds of pounds. But the duty of care and the compensation parts are completely separate, and it is absolutely, if anybody, any airline leaving from a UK airport says, oh, yeah, we don't need to do this because it wasn't our fault in terms of finding an alternative flight and providing hotels, that is completely wrong. There is, unfortunately, a kind of loophole which any non-European, non-UK airline flying from outside Europe into the UK, into Heathrow, can just turn around and say, the air passenger rights rules don't apply to us. So it's a real mess, I'm afraid. And
this is going to go on for quite some time. It's going to impact other airlines on other airports for a few days to come, one imagines.
Well, that is the big problem, Alex. Yeah, we are going to see, I'm afraid, that British Airways in particular, with pilots, planes, cabin crew strewn across Europe, that it's going to take them several days to get back on track. And that's assuming that Heathrow gets the lights back on at midnight tonight, as we hope. And then, yes, other knock-on effects are going to ripple through. Other airports are not affected at the moment, except to the extent that if you're Manchester, if you're Gatwick, if you're Glasgow, suddenly you've got a few thousand extra people arriving. And as a result of that, you found that there was simply no way of getting people quickly through, because, of course, they don't have the extra baggage handlers and UK border force and everybody else.
Simon, thank you ever so much for those updates. Everyone knows Simon Calder. He doesn't need much outro, does he? He is, of course, the travel guru at The Independent. Let's speak now to Dr. Alan Mendoza, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society, at this breaking news, which is that counter-terrorism police are now going to be part of the investigation into the fire at the substation that has caused Heathrow to be closed down. Now, Alan, my sort of gut instinct said to me when I came into the newsroom this morning, I said to my producer, look, do you think this could be foul play? Because what we do know about enemies of the state is that arson attacks, particularly on critical infrastructure, is part of their playbook. What's your gut feeling about this?
Yes, I mean, look, it has to be investigated. It's an obvious path for any state actor, state-inspired actor who wants to cause trouble to go after critical infrastructure like this. So it's very much within the purview of the sorts of conversations we've been hearing about from MI5 in the past year about, sort of Russian agents and others potentially causing chaos in the UK. It doesn't mean, of course, this is an attack from abroad, but the possibility needs to be discounted and needs to be discounted quickly to discover exactly what has gone on here. Whether it is or isn't, it is a critical national infrastructure fail. It's a fail because you can't have Heathrow shut down for a day. There should be numerous ways that's avoided. For that not to be avoided tells you that we have a security problem potentially, but B, an infrastructure problem that needs to be resolved quickly, and we need a full national audit. Hopefully there is no terrorism of any kind involved, and it is purely a sort of a fire, as was stated. But even in that case, this is not good news for the UK.
Yeah, I mean, do we need to be asking a question about why our critical infrastructure isn't defended? As you said, we don't know what's gone on here regarding this particular electrical substation. To me, it's strange that not only is the substation being taken out, but all the backup generators as well seem to have not worked, or something's happened to them too. I don't know how they're laid out. I don't know if it's all part of the same inferno that's engulfed the lot of it. But it does raise the question that even if this isn't a malign attack, it potentially could have been. Do we need to be looking into how we should better protect our infrastructure?
Absolutely. There's clearly got to be a hardening of our national infrastructure. We've argued for this for a long time, to say that there needs to be this full audit of those critical things, that if they start going down, the country is in real trouble. And obviously, an airport is one of those areas that you want to have fully defended. So yes, clearly, if it can go down this quickly, whether it is by an attack or whether it is by a natural or unnatural occurrence, but one that is not a terrorist setup, either way, you've got a situation where the UK has been left undefended as a result of that. And clearly, we have to, take lessons from this and make sure that hardening occurs so that things like this can't happen again. And if one thing is knocked out, that doesn't mean that every other fail-safe system is also knocked out with it. It stands to reason that you need to have different sources, as it were, of power to make sure that you're not all caught out in one attack.
Yeah, I mean, this could be just a horrific accident that has taken place at this substation. It could be a malign actor. But let's talk about arson attacks that have taken place in the UK at the hands of foreign actors. I know of, was it a DHL cargo ship with all these exploding devices on? We also know that weapons manufacturers have been targeted by arson attacks believed to be conducted by Russian agents. I mean, what sort of things have been taking place in the UK that have been underreported?
Well, you've highlighted that. There was a whole spate of these sorts of activities, and I think MI5 were quite open, in their sort of hint, saying, look, there are problems here. We've got GRU agents roaming Britain streets. We've got spy rings. We have other forms of espionage going on. We've got the potential for disruption on Britain's streets. And I think what it points to is the need to resource our intelligence services to the hilt to make sure we know what's going on in the UK, and to make sure, again, that there are not these opportunities for those agents working for foreign powers to cause the kinds of disruptions that we've seen. Now, it's one thing if it's low level, you don't want it, but it's not going to, knock out an entire, grid or a setup in that way. But when we're talking about the critical national infrastructure path, imagine if a nuclear power plant was attacked, for example. I mean, there can be some truly horrendous consequences. So we need to have a proper handle, like I said, on what our infrastructure defence requirements are, and we need to make sure that we are set up to defend them.
I mean, I read a fascinating report by a modern war professor at King's College London into the possibility of sort of mass civil unrest in the UK, Dr. David Betts. And as part of his study, he talked about the fact that critical infrastructure wasn't defended, and raised the possibility of, if somebody did really want to create havoc in the UK, that actually if you did cause things like blackouts, where all of a sudden you've got rotting food on supermarket shelves, you've got, people not able to function inside their own homes, that it can lead to mass unrest.
Well, indeed, the nightmare has always been what's known as an EMP attack, basically, electromagnetic pulse attack, which is normally conducted in this sort of context by detonating a nuclear weapon in the atmosphere above the target. So it's not a detonation on the ground. You're not actually trying to kill people with the direct detonation. But what you are doing is knocking out all the electrics, basically. And the scenario you just discussed is indeed what would happen with an EMP attack. And that is why, these things figure quite high on the concerns of domestic agencies, because they will be truly catastrophic. If you don't have a hardening again of your electrical infrastructure against things like that, you can get mass blackouts, you can get water failing, no distribution. Think about the cities. Within 3 days, the cities basically become uninhabitable, and that is obviously a disaster. So this sort of thing, let's hope that there's only a fire. Let's hope that there's therefore a wake-up call to the government and to others to look at what's going on. But it does open up a whole range of scenarios that we would not want happening.
Yeah, it's interesting, actually, because it actually coincides with these ongoing discussions about a potential ceasefire in Ukraine, that Russia getting close to agreeing to a ceasefire on critical infrastructure. And it does make me think that when we talk about grey zone warfare in your line of work, we talk about these acts of war, which aren't necessarily dropping bombs on buildings or missiles on office blocks. It is about causing mass disruption like this.
Yep, and Russia is the prime agent of chaos in this particular regard. They have been at this for decades, basically, planning this sort of thing for decades. And there's obviously considerable evidence that they have been engaged in at least low-level such activity in the UK in recent years. So the problem is that we know that Russia has been able to infiltrate the UK. We know the potential for disruption. So now, if we know all those things, and like I said, hopefully there is just an innocent fire, this is the wake-up call for government to take it seriously, to say what is happening with our critical national infrastructure, how do we harden it to make sure that neither accidents nor intentional damage can occur in the future.
Dr. Alan Mendoza, it's always fantastic catching up with you.